Better late than never, here we go folks, the last Blu-ray and DVD update for 2024 covering the past few months, but for simplicity's sake we'll just call it the November update. Anyway, as usual, let's begin with the Blu-rays and then we will move into the DVDs. First up we have Deadpool and Wolverine, the third film in the trilogy, and I really do like the first two films, great fun overall, but this entry is very different in comparison, where Deadpool has finally joined the MCU, and I would describe this film as really a love letter to the era of Marvel that came long before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, saying farewell to those titles and characters that came long before it, since Disney purchased Fox a few years ago, and is currently working on integrating the X-Men amongst other characters into the current Marvel timeline, and Deadpool as a character I feel has arguably the most potential, being heavily meta-driven, and this story takes full advantage of that, moving him from the Fox timeline to the MCU, but at a cost, where he moves over and everyone and everything he loves gets wiped out by the TVA. To stop this from happening, he seeks out a variant of Wolverine to save his world. Logan as we know it is dead, but that doesn't mean a variant can't step in. And Hugh Jackman returning as Wolverine was a huge deal, which I absolutely love. By far my favourite part of the film, along with the cameos. I'm not really one that buys into fan-servicey stuff, but seeing certain Fox-era characters get a second chance on the big screen felt like a fond farewell. Plus, I really enjoyed the end credits, finalising that tribute feeling. Easily one of the best films of 2024, very funny, heartfelt, and overall worth checking out in my opinion. Next up we have Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, the prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, and I was very surprised to hear this film did so poorly at the box office. More than likely this was due to it being a female-led film and how online narratives see this as a deliberate ploy for inclusivity, and people just go with that and decide not to watch certain films because of it. If you're a sheep and you follow that sort of shit, well, good luck to you. But expanding the lore of the Wasteland under the rule of Immortan Joe, the villain from Fury Road, I really enjoyed this. The action is unbelievable, and Chris Hemsworth gives the role of Dementus his all, genuinely my favourite thing he has ever done, and you can perhaps argue the film was unnecessary, showing how Furiosa, played this time by Anya Taylor-Joy, becomes the freedom fighter that she is in the fourth Mad Max movie, but I'm led to believe this story already existed during the production of Fury Road. And with that in mind, George Miller is a fascinating filmmaker because he spares no detail. The man lives for the story, and I love his passion for all the intricate details that go into his work, and being a box office flop, another Mad Max film really does look unlikely, which is super unfortunate. But there's apparently a script ready to go for Mad Max The Wastelands, so hopefully we do get at least one more entry in the franchise. Also released this year, we have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. How long are these titles going to get at this point? But I would say this is definitely the weakest film in the modern take of Planet of the Apes. It's still worth checking out though, and I hope this sets up a much stronger trilogy of films going forward. And set 300 years after Caesar's story, we follow a new ape society living by the word of Caesar, but words can be twisted, leading to conflict amongst two very different ape clans. And there's some excellent characters to appreciate in this film, and I really liked Raka, the orangutan played by Peter McCann, and hopefully we do see that character return in a future film. Proxima Caesar was an interesting villain, with his thirst for knowledge being his undoing by the end. Some great characters generally speaking, but the film was a drag. The pacing really wasn't great, especially at the beginning, but luckily it does pick up later on. I also wasn't a massive fan of the human character May, who deliberately betrayed the main ape character Noah, but I think this will impact Noah and his trust for humans should the story continue in a follow-up. And with that in mind, I'd say if you liked the other films, it's worth at least one watch, especially for the stunning visuals, but I found the story a bit lacking in a lot of areas. Next up we have a couple of animated films, beginning with the latest offering from Pixar, Inside Out 2, a sequel that I was amazed to hear was even a thing because it seemed extremely unnecessary, and I did like the first film a lot, but I wasn't really interested in any more stories from this world. Well, I am man enough to admit when I'm wrong, because this was honestly a lot of fun. Overall, some great world-building expansions, with the girl Riley now a teenager, therefore her personified emotions need upgrading with new characters added to the equation. including Anxiety, played by Maya Hawke, who was by far the standout character of this film in my opinion. Although very funny, she unintentionally becomes the main antagonist without realizing it, and her awkward actions lead to her taking control of Riley, pushing Joy to one side, and without Joy, Riley is a complete social nightmare, gradually becoming more miserable, and the more anxiety interferes with Riley's life, the worse things get overall. I was very surprised at how well this film did at the box office as well, since the later Pixar sequels usually aren't that well received. Well, this became the first animated film to gross over $1 billion, and with that said, there'll no doubt be a third film someday, but that's Inside Out 2, overall a surprising sequel. Next we have a Japanese animated movie, A Silent Voice, adapted from the manga series from the early 2010s, and this film was just brutal if I'm being honest, just a heartbreaking story about a poor deaf girl who is relentlessly bullied throughout her school life, and then years later, the main bully, who is our protagonist, he has to confront his shameful past when he accidentally bumps into the deaf girl later in life, and he wants to make things right, and it's a story about making amends whilst exploring the regretful feelings from doing something so horrific. Some elements were a little bit cliche in this film, such as forcing a romance between the characters, but I think that was inevitable, and overall definitely a memorable viewing experience. If you like Japanese animation, you may have a fond appreciation for this film. Moving on to a couple of TV shows, we have the complete first season of The Last of Us, starring Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, and I have shown this on the channel before, but at the time I'd sadly not watched any of it. Well, I finished it a few weeks ago, and overall it was a pretty solid adaptation. There's some moments that feel a little bit on the nose, deliberately paying homage to the video game, but I like how the show felt like a faithful retelling of the main storyline, but with its own expanded elements. Particularly for me, the third episode was by far my favourite, and I had heard incredible things about it prior to watching the show, and actor Nick Offerman even won an award for that episode. Well known for his role as Ron Swanson in Parks and Recreation, he plays surprisingly a much similar character, where he prepares for the apocalypse, ensuring he's independent enough to handle any outside threats. But when a stranger comes along, he takes a chance and trusts this random guy, only for a romance to blossom between them, and I really enjoyed how this story was told, being heavily character driven, and I'm very excited for Season 2 coming out next year in 2025. A very unexpected Blu-ray release, we have Ted Season 1, and I say unexpected because firstly, I did not expect this show to receive a physical media release, and secondly, the UK only got a DVD copy of this show, but luckily the Blu-ray is region free, which I imported from the US, and the show itself is a prequel series to the Ted movies by Seth MacFarlane, who returns to breathe new life into a franchise that, to be honest, I thought was long dead. But with 7 episodes in total, I really enjoyed this show, which felt like a live-action Family Guy, and originally it was supposed to be a limited series on the streaming service Peacock, but it did so well ratings-wise they renewed it for a second run, so hopefully it does continue to impress with its top-quality writing and performances. Really enjoyed the comedy throughout this, and for those that are interested, I did do a full series review at the beginning of the year when the show began, and I'll have that link down below in the description. I definitely recommend this series. I'd arguably say it's a lot better than the Ted movies, and I can't wait to see more going forward. Delving into the horror genre, we have seasons 1 and 2 of the Chucky series from the Sci-Fi Channel, and I know a lot of fans were deeply saddened to hear the show had been cancelled. I was a bit of a latecomer to this. I've recently finished season 1, but I've not moved on to season 2 just yet, but I had a lot of fun with the series from what I've seen thus far. It's very cheesy, but I was surprised at just how well the character and the legacy of Chucky worked for a TV show adaptation. And over the course of 8 episodes, we pick up where the movies left off after 2017's Cult of Chucky, and the soul of Charles Lee Ray has been divided amongst multiple good guy dolls, being the only vessel he can possess, and when a group of high school students fall victim to his presence, mainly our protagonist Jake Wheeler, bullied and alone, he befriends the doll, which ultimately ruins his life, revealing an entire network of legacy characters who have all been impacted by Chucky's reign of terror, and my personal favourites being the return of Andy Barclay, now an adult, and his sister Kyle, and their story was really interesting, travelling across the USA hunting good guy dolls. Like something out of Pulp Fiction, it was just very strange but very fun, and no doubt you'll appreciate the series if you did enjoy the later films in the franchise. Speaking of, I recently did a video with my good friend Arvid, aka Junkmaster3, ranking the entire franchise, so if you'd like to hear an informal discussion about the Chucky movies, I'll put a link to that video in the description. In preparation for making that video, I decided to grab the documentary Living with Chucky for the collection. And although this would have perhaps worked as some kind of DVD extra, a lot of hard work did go into this film, and it was great to see the director, Kira Ellis Gardner, daughter of Tony Gardner, who worked on a lot of the films, put this together, collating interviews with the main names behind the franchise, sharing behind-the-scenes info. It was great to see each individual film discussed at length. Plus, I loved seeing everyone's continued celebration and enthusiasm for the franchise. After over 30 years, and if you've not seen the films in a while, this will be a great opportunity to help reignite your interest in the franchise. Overall, very enjoyable. Finally, for the Blu-rays, we have a set I've been looking to grab for the collection for a very long time, that being the Bugs Bunny 80th Anniversary box set. And as many know, I love classic Looney Tunes. I recently grabbed this set from the US Amazon on a Prime deal, and it is quite a bulky thing, but that's because it comes with this pop vinyl, which I will be selling. I don't really collect pops anymore, but these ones that were bathed in glitter, super ugly in my opinion, but obviously to each his own in that regard. As for the set itself, it's a 3-disc Blu-ray with 60 shorts in total, lots of new ones restored and released for the first time, and I've sadly just not had a chance to watch any of these as of yet, but I'm looking forward to doing so, and that's going to do it for the Blu-rays. Let's move on to the DVDs. First up, we have a TV miniseries I've had in the collection for a while, but I've only just got around to watching, being the HBO show Chernobyl. And oh boy, this was an eye-opening and, generally speaking, a fascinating dramatization of the real-life disaster. I guess like any historical-based project, yes, there are some inaccuracies, but as somebody who wasn't overly familiar with the Chernobyl disaster, this encouraged me to do some further reading, and it's a devastating event in human history, which I feel was dramatized extremely well with phenomenal acting from all those involved, particularly Paul Ritter's character of Anatoly Dyatlov, who successfully conveys an incompetent leader with one hell of an ego problem. Stellan Skarsgård stole the show for a good majority, and I loved seeing his character of Boris clashed with Legasov, played by Jared Harris. I'd arguably say this show has some of the most memorable performances I've seen from any show recently, with many layers of intrigue that really do keep you hooked throughout. For sure, a series I would highly recommend checking out. Next, we have a very bizarre Edward Norton movie, who, as many know, is one of my favourite actors. I suppose more accurately, Norton stars twice in this film, double the Norton, which more often than not when an actor takes on 2 roles simultaneously, it's a complete disaster. Leaves of Grass, named after the Walt Whitman book of the same name, I would say is a very average film, but it does test the acting capabilities of Norton, who is by far the best part of the film, delivering 2 very different performances that overlap and clash more than you'd think. Playing twin brothers Bill and Brady, Bill is a university lecturer, whereas Brady is a stereotyped southern drug dealer, mass-producing weed and looking to dominate the marijuana territory in Oklahoma. In a case of borrowed identity, Brady needs to use Bill as an alibi, and so he forces him to come back home so as to not get caught committing a horrific series of crimes to benefit his drug business. Overall, meh, not a great film. The premise got old very quickly, and I wasn't a massive fan of the ending. It may be worth perhaps one watch if you enjoy comedies with a darker sense of humour, but not really a film that I would recommend. Another film I wasn't overly impressed by, but I did enjoy the concept of, The Final Cut starring Robin Williams. And I went through a phase of watching his movies and I found myself hooked on his much darker and I guess less comedic performances. 1 Hour Photo is a film of his that I would highly recommend, and this film was suggested to me off the back of that. Williams plays a loner-like character of Alan Hackman, who takes on the job of a cutter, and in this dystopian setting, children born into wealthy families are given an implant that records their entire life from their point of view, and Hackman's job is to review the footage when the person has died, and edit their life down into a film that can be shown at funerals. Yeah, quite a morbid concept, and I wasn't a massive fan of the main plot, where Hackman recognizes a figure from his past while watching somebody else's point of view. This person apparently died during a childhood flashback, which begs the question, how is he alive now? Kinda surreal, the ending was somewhat unfulfilling, killing the film's momentum, in my opinion at least. Perhaps worth one watch, but again, sadly not a film that I would recommend. A couple more Marvel movies that kinda connect to Deadpool and Wolverine. We have the original Daredevil from 2003 starring Ben Affleck, and a film that I haven't seen as of yet, the follow-up movie from 2005, Elektra, starring the very beautiful Jennifer Gardner. And oh boy, Daredevil as a movie has not aged very well. Looking at it objectively, it's a superhero origin story plagued by tragedy, where young Matt Murdock is blinded as a child, where he then learns to see without his eyes, relying on sound, which then enhances his reflexes, and taking on the profession of a lawyer by day. By night he puts on the mask, becoming Daredevil, defending the innocent by brutally murdering the guilty. And I feel the fight choreography is arguably the best part of the film, but story-wise, it turns into a half-baked revenge plot, intertwined with a very forced romance between Matt Murdock and Elektra, with it being referenced in Deadpool and Wolverine. I thought it was worth watching, but honestly that's about it, yeah, and I don't even know if I'll check out the Elektra movie. You can let me know in the comments, is this worth my time? I cannot believe I have this film in my collection and that I'm forcing myself to talk about it. But hey, there's no backing out now. Starring the backwards man himself, this is Freddy Got Fingered, an estranged comedy from the early 2000s from the demented mind of Tom Green. And I'll admit, as bad as this movie is, this was hilarious as a group watch. I watched this with a few friends, one of which found it absolutely abysmal, which made it 10 times funnier, where Tom Green plays Gord, an aspiring animator who's looking to make it big in Hollywood. The only problem? Nobody believes in him, especially his father, played by Rip Torn, and Gord is often compared to his brother, and the majority of the film is just Tom Green acting deranged as Rip Torn brutally insults him, which is made worse when Gord starts telling lies about his father molesting his brother, hence the title, Freddy Got Fingered. Yes, if you like terrible movies in a so bad it's good sense, then you may get some kind of weird enjoyment from this film, but I don't know if I can even recommend this. Just a very strange movie and overall just a bizarre experience. So that is Freddy Got Fingered. Concluding with a few animated titles, first up we have Looney Tunes Back in Action, and I've actually never seen this film all the way through. I recall catching bits of it when I was young, and I don't expect too much from this film when I do get around to watching it, but I thought it'd be worth checking out. I recall the scenes with Wile E. Coyote in particular, which I ended up revisiting a little while ago when editing a video covering the Coyote vs. Acme movie controversy, with that title now shelved indefinitely. I'm looking forward to checking this out properly anyway. It's interesting to look back on titles like this through adult eyes, which I'm sure will be at the very least somewhat enjoyable. The latest offering from South Park on DVD, we have the streaming movie Not Suitable for Children, and I feel this is honestly the most underappreciated TV movie that's come out thus far, and I say that because the advertising for this was very minimal when it first dropped onto Paramount+. It was almost as though the folks behind the marketing for this film just completely forgot it was coming out, and then it just seemed to die a death. Nobody was talking about it in the same way people were the Pandaverse movie, for example. But overall, giving this a rewatch, even though I couldn't really recall too much from it, it was great to rekindle my interest with this film because of how topical it has become as of late. South Park, as always, Trey Parker and Matt Stone being ahead of the game as usual, where this covers the topic of online influencers, content creators, and how easily influenced children are, especially when it comes down to generic YouTuber products, for example, like this parody of the drink Prime, now Cred. And I thought overall this was very well done in terms of the satirical content and the utilization of certain characters, even if with Randy Marsh, for example, we unfortunately had to see his knob for a good majority of this. Aside from that, overall I found this film to be very enjoyable, definitely worth checking out, and I'll have a review of this up on the channel at some point very soon. Appropriate for this time of year between Halloween and Christmas, we have The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I'm sure I've spoken about this film on the channel before, but I always enjoy rewatching this on the lead up towards the holidays. A stop-motion musical classic that has aged beautifully as we explore Jack Skellington's intrigue of Christmas trying to bring the holiday season to the nightmarish Halloween town, and there's so many memorable characters and enthralling songs to appreciate from this film. Let me know in the comments, what's your favourite song from this? For me, I love Jack's What's This song when he discovers Christmas Town for the first time, and if you've not seen this, you are missing out big time. I would highly recommend checking it out. And finally, to conclude this update video, we have the Shrek 1-4 collection. And I would say complete collection, but that would be a lie, with Shrek 5 coming out in 2026. And I ended up marathoning all 4 films with my partner. I'd only seen the first film, bits of the second, none of the third, and the last film, and I could only really recall the first one, but it was genuinely a fun experience going through all of the movies in chronological order. I'd still say the first one is my favourite, with a twisted take on the classic sort of save the princess storyline, but I loved the second film, especially the final battle with the giant gingerbread man. The third film I heard pretty bad things about, but I actually quite enjoyed it for the most part, especially with the comedy angle, and an expansion to Shrek's family with 3 children. And then the last film, Shrek Forever After, explores an alternative timeline where Shrek never met Fiona thanks to a trick contract drawn up by Rumpelstiltskin. I'm intrigued to see where Shrek 5 will go, maybe a time jump in order to keep things feeling fresh. Who knows, but that's the Shrek 1-4 collection. Anyway, that's going to do it for this Blu-ray and DVD update for November 2024. I hope you did enjoy. Please do leave me a like if you did, drop me a comment if you checked out any of the titles I've featured in this video, and for more content, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, DVD Review Studios.
Are you threatening me?